1944. Europe is in flames. The Third Reich seems unstoppable, but for the first time, something begins to crack. Soviet troops advance from the east, the Allies land in Normandy, and Hitler's dream of dominating the continent begins to collapse. But even as the Reich crumbles, Hitler does not surrender. His orders grow more desperate. His closest men begin to doubt him. And the final goal, exterminating millions, continues until the very last day. In this documentary, we will relive the most decisive year for Nazi Germany. From the battlefronts to the Berlin bunker, we will watch Hitler's power collapse, day after day, and how his obsession dragged an entire nation into destruction. Stay until the end, because the end of this story is not just the fall of one man, it is the darkest warning history ever gave us. The year begins with a devastating blow for the Reich. On January 27, 1944, the siege of Leningrad ends after nearly 900 days of blockade. Soviet forces break through the German lines and open the path for a counteroffensive that will not stop until Berlin. Hitler is furious. He orders resistance at all costs, no matter the losses. His generals begin to notice something unsettling. The Führer no longer listens to advice, gives increasingly irrational orders, and punishes anyone who questions his strategy. In February, the Luftwaffe suffers another blow. Allied bombings over Leipzig, Augsburg, and Berlin intensify. For the first time, the German civilian population feels that the war has arrived at their own doorstep. March 1944 brings even more bad news. Soviet troops liberate Ukraine, and the Allies continue their air raids day and night. Still, Hitler remains convinced that Germany can resist and strike back. He begins speaking of miracle weapons, like the V-2 rockets and the Me-262 jet fighters, which he claims will reverse the situation. But at the front, the reality is very different. With each passing day, the Red Army gains ground, and Germany's losses are impossible to replace. April 1944 finds Hitler increasingly isolated in his headquarters. Reports from the front are disastrous. The Soviets are advancing, Italy is practically lost, and the Allies are bombing Germany without pause. Yet the Führer remains convinced that the miracle weapons will save the Reich. He orders the production of V-1 and V-2 rockets to be accelerated and insists that the Me-262 jet fighter be converted into a bomber, a decision that delays its deployment. May brings no relief. The Luftwaffe can no longer protect the skies, and the Allies bomb oil refineries and supply lines, leaving the Wehrmacht with less and less fuel. And then comes June. On June 6, 1944, the Normandy landings begin. Operation Overlord. More than 150,000 Allied soldiers cross the English Channel and land on the beaches of France. Despite the defenses of the Atlantic Wall, the Germans cannot contain the invasion. Hitler reacts too late. He refuses to release the panzer divisions until he is sure it is not a diversion. By the time the tanks arrive, the Allies have already secured the beaches. June ends with another disaster, Operation Bagration. On the Eastern Front, the Red Army launches the largest offensive of the entire war. More than 2 million Soviet soldiers crush the German Army Group Center. It is one of the Wehrmacht's most devastating defeats, losing more than 300,000 men. In just 1 month, the Reich has been struck on both fronts. The myth of German invincibility begins to collapse. July 1944 is the month that almost changes the course of the war, but not in Germany's favor. On July 20th, a group of German officers conspired to assassinate Hitler inside his own headquarters, the Wolf's Lair. Klaus von Stauffenberg places a bomb in the conference room, but the plan fails. Hitler survives with only minor injuries. The retaliation is brutal. Thousands of officers and civilians are arrested, many are executed, and the Gestapo uses the opportunity to eliminate anyone suspected of disloyalty. Far from weakening the Führer, the attack makes him more paranoid and authoritarian than ever. Meanwhile, the Western Front collapses. In August, the Allies break through in Normandy with Operation Cobra. The Wehrmacht is encircled in the Falaise pocket, losing more than 50,000 men and much of its heavy equipment. On August 25, Paris is liberated. For Hitler, the loss of the French capital is a devastating blow. He had ordered the city destroyed before abandoning it. But his own commander, Dietrich von Choltitz, disobeys, saving Paris from total destruction. September brings no relief. The Allies advance rapidly toward the German border, liberate Brussels and Antwerp, and push into the Netherlands. Only the failure of Operation Market Garden gives the Germans a brief pause, but the Reich is retreating on every front. In the east, the Soviets keep advancing, retaking Poland and closing in dangerously on East Prussia. Hitler withdraws even more into his bunker, convinced he can still deliver a decisive blow with his secret weapons. But reality is clear. Germany is losing the war. With the Reich in retreat, Hitler prepares a desperate gamble. He orders his last reserves of troops and tanks to be concentrated on the Western Front for a surprise attack, the Ardennes offensive. His objective is ambitious: split the Allied armies, capture the port of Antwerp, and force the West to negotiate a separate peace, allowing him to focus everything against the USSR. But before this offensive begins, the Reich is thrown into chaos. On the Eastern Front, the Red Army advances relentlessly. In the Baltic, Latvia and Estonia fall under Soviet control. Inside Germany, the cities are being reduced to rubble by Allied bombing raids. Hamburg, Cologne, and Dusseldorf suffer devastating attacks. The civilian population lives under the constant threat of air raid sirens. Shelters fill up every night. On December 16th, in the middle of a snowstorm, the German offensive begins. More than 200,000 soldiers and 1,000 tanks strike the Allied lines, taking the Americans completely by surprise. Thus begins the Battle of the Bulge. For the first few days, the success is total. Enemy lines are broken, Belgian towns like Bastogne are encircled. Hitler celebrates, he believes the war can still turn in his favor. But the optimism does not last. The weather clears, allowing Allied air superiority to strike, and the German forces run out of fuel and reinforcements. By the end of December, the offensive is stopped, and German losses are irreplaceable. The Reich has spent its last reserves. The defeat in the Ardennes marks the beginning of the end. From this moment, the war becomes a race to Berlin. The winter of 1945 marks the beginning of the end. On the Eastern Front, the Red Army launches the Vistula-Oder offensive. Millions of Soviet soldiers advance like an unstoppable tide, liberating Poland and pushing German lines to the very gates of Berlin. The Reich's troops are exhausted, poorly equipped, and out of fuel. In the west, the Allies cross the Rhine and penetrate deep into the heart of Germany. Meanwhile, in the Chancellery bunker in Berlin, Hitler retreats into a world of fantasy. His orders become increasingly irrational. He demands impossible counterattacks, dismisses generals for treason, and places his hopes in armies that no longer exist. The German capital becomes a besieged fortress. Women, the elderly, and Hitler youth children are armed and sent into the streets to resist the invasion. On April 16, the Battle of Berlin begins. Soviet artillery turns the city into a hell of fire and smoke. The fighting is street by street, bunker by bunker. Inside the Fear bunker, Hitler receives catastrophic news. His field marshals surrender. His armies are annihilated, and the Soviet encirclement tightens. On April 30, 1945, seeing that all is lost, Hitler commits suicide alongside Eva Braun. Their bodies are burned in the Chancellery garden as Soviet troops advance just meters away. A week later, on May 8, Germany signs its unconditional surrender. The war in Europe is over. With Hitler's suicide and the surrender of the Third Reich, Europe lies in ruins. Entire cities have been destroyed, millions of people displaced, and the full scale of the Holocaust begins to emerge. The Nuremberg trials revealed to the world the crimes committed in the concentration and extermination camps. For the first time in history, the leaders of a state are tried for crimes against humanity. But the end of the war does not bring absolute peace. The rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union sparks the Cold War, a new era of global tension marked by the nuclear threat. Germany is divided in two: the Federal Republic in the West and the Democratic Republic in the East, under Soviet influence. Berlin becomes the symbol of a divided world. Yet, from the ashes of the Reich, reconstruction begins. Western Europe recovers thanks to the Marshall Plan. And in the following decades, Germany becomes a democratic economic power. The fall of Hitler marked the end of fascist dictatorship in Europe and the start of a new reflection on the limits of power, ideology, and science. The legacy of 1945 remains alive today. It is a warning about the danger of combining fanaticism, technology, and unchecked power. Remembering this history is essential to avoid repeating it. Because if the 20th century taught us anything, it is that barbarism can return, if we ever let our guard down.
Nur dann, wenn wir in der Partei durch unser aller Zutun die höchste Verkörperung